Hey there everyone, thank you so much for being here, thank you so much for watching. In this video I'm going to take this device, it's the UniFi Express, which I absolutely love, and I'm going to do a full deployment of a UniFi network for small businesses, which I think this device is perfect for. But there are a few things you need to take into account. First of all, this device is affordable, but it's designed for small networks. It can only support around 60 wireless clients, which in most cases is plenty, and it can only adopt 4 other UniFi devices, switches or access points, only 4 other. This device can only run UniFi network, meaning no protect, no talk, no access, nothing. And this device cannot do IPS at all, it doesn't have the option. So in this video we are going to do some firewall rules and some country restrictions. We are not going to keep the gate wide open, but again, something to take into account. Alright, let's get started. Alright guys, so I connected my UniFi Express to my ISP on the WAN port and my computer on the LAN port. And remember that the UniFi Express only has one WAN port and one LAN port, so if you know you want to connect several wire devices, you might want to add a switch to your deployment, but again, it's up to you. And one other thing I would recommend that you do before getting started is try to think about the types of devices or the types or the groups of devices that you're going to have in your deployment. And this will help you understand if you need to use VLANs in your deployment. If you want to get to know the VLAN concept, I did create a video dedicated on VLANs about it was about a year and a half ago, but it's still relevant today. It will really help you cement the idea or the concept of VLANs. As you can see, my UniFi Express is just opened up and popped up, ready to be configured, but I'm going to go back to my whiteboard. These are just my demonstration VLANs I'm going to create in this deployment, but again, you need to figure out the types of devices you have in your deployment. So with the UniFi Express connected, all you need to do, if you didn't get this window jump on you, is to just open up a web browser and go into 192.168.1.1. That's the default address for all UniFi devices. And as you can see, my device seems to be not able to pick up that I'm connected to the internet, or if you need to authenticate to your ISP, for example with PPPoE, you will get this window as well. Just click on other setup options and select PPPoE. I will continue offline at this point. So let's set up console offline. It can happen. Let's change the console name to Take Me Out Coffee. Click on next. Since we don't have an internet connection, we are not able to attach this UniFi console to our Ubiquiti account. So we'll need to provide a local password to log in with. So let's click on next. Let's create a new Wi-Fi SSID, but I'm going to recreate it later on because I do want to use the pre-shared key option. I will get to it, of course. Click on finish, and now this setting up might take anywhere from 1, 2, 3, 5 minutes. Just be patient and give it time. I'm going to pause the recording right here and resume it once this is done. Alright, so our setup is complete. Let's go to dashboard. Alright, so my UniFi Express has restarted and now my internet connection has been picked up. And there are a few things I recommend before you go and start configuring your network. And let's start with updates. If your UniFi OS is not up to date, you will get an update button right here. Same as your network. If your network application isn't up to date, you will see this update button right here. I recommend that you go ahead and do the updates before you start diving into your network. Even though it takes time and it's tedious, I really think it's better to start off fresh with the latest of everything. And when it comes to auto updates, in large deployments, I usually turn them off because I know there's an IT team that will manage updates for the console. In small deployments, I'm not sure an IT team is available, and I think it's worth taking, quotes, the risk and auto-updating than leaving your console with an outdated version of UniFi OS that will become more and more vulnerable as time goes by. Pick your time, pick your cadence, pick your day, just make sure updates are on. What I am going to do right now is update my network application and let it run. In the meantime, I'm going to go into console settings because I do want to enable remote access. And now I'm going to have to attach this console to my Ubiquiti account. Alright, so now I have remote access, and I do want to make sure that auto backups is also enabled. So check that checkbox and click apply. That's great. Now I'll go back to my applications tab and I'm going to wait for my network to finish updating. Alright, so my network app has finished updating and actually all our administrative tasks are over, so we can start configuring our network. So let's launch our network app. Alright, so we're just getting started, so we don't have anything on our main dashboard. So what we'll do is we'll just jump into our settings tab and go to networks, and we'll start adding our networks. The first network is a default network that's created by default actually. So let's go into it, uncheck auto scale, and let's leave it 192.168.1.1. As you recall, that's our internal subnet. That's great. What I want to do is to change the auto to manual, and I do want to apply different DNS servers. So I'll click on options, uncheck DNS server, uncheck auto, and I'll change to the Google DNS if you want to. You don't have to. Alright, so now we'll create another network, another VLAN actually, and we'll create our IoT network. Let's call it IoT. We don't want to auto scale it, and that will be 192.168.2.1. That's great, that's good enough. Change the advanced to manual. Let's give it a VLAN ID of 2. That's great. And again, let's give it a DNS server that's 8.8.8. And we have another VLAN we need to create that's for guests. Again, we don't want to auto scale it, and we'll change it to 92. That's the subnet I chose for my guests because I want it to be very obvious that clients on this subnet are sort of external. So again, I'm going to change this to manual, VLAN ID 99. But for guests, I do want to also apply isolation because I don't want guests to communicate to anywhere but the internet. They will not even be able to communicate with each other. Alright, let's change our DNS server again to 8.8.8. And actually, all our subnets or VLANs are now configured, which is great. So what we'll go right now is to the Wi-Fi settings. I'm going to delete the Wi-Fi SSID that we created with the wizard. Let's create a new one and let's call it Take Me Out Coffee. But what I'm going to do next is not supply a password. I'm going to change the advanced here to manual, and I'm going to select private pre-shared keys. And now I will be able to select a network and give it a password. Another network and a different password. And select another network and a different password. And what I am able to do right now is to create just a single Wi-Fi SSID, and every time I use a different password like I configured right here, I will be assigned to the VLAN that corresponds with this password. By the way, it's a great way. The UniFi Express has a limitation of only 3 Wi-Fi SSIDs, and if you have more VLANs, then you will not be able to create a Wi-Fi SSID to each one of them. And this way you will be able to only create one SSID, but with as much passwords as you want. So let's click on save. Other settings are just fine with me, and let's add a Wi-Fi network. I will of course test it later on. So we've created our networks, we've created our Wi-Fi settings. What I want to do now is to address some security settings. So let's go to security. And I do want to enable country restrictions. I want to block on both directions any traffic coming from, example, Iran or Iraq or North Korea, and any country really that you really don't expect any traffic and you don't do business with. Just add it to this list to minimize risks. And DNS Shield is also something that allows you to keep your DNS queries private, away from prying eyes, your ISPs or attackers, and there's really no reason not to enable it. So I'm selecting auto and apply. Port forwarding I'm not going to do right now. I'm going to go back to that later on. Traffic and firewall rules is something that I really want to spend some time on. When we're in the simple view, we're really actually creating traffic rules. For example, the Take Me Out Coffee is a workplace, and I don't want any of my employees, for example, to go into social networks when they're at work. So I'll create an entry and name it block social. The action is block. I'm going to select my default network, which is my internal network, and I actually can drill down into individual devices, but I'm going to select my internal subnet. I'm going to select an app group and select social networks. Click on save. The schedule is always, and add rule. This will take some time to take effect, and in the meantime, I want to create firewall rules. Actually, the first thing that I want to do is to go into profiles, IP groups, and create a new group. And this group will be a sort of a master group of all the possible subnets of internal network. I'm going to call it RFC 1980 because that's the industry standard actually. And let's select subnets. The first one is 10.0.0.0/8. Click on add, and 172.16.0.0/12 and 192.168.0.0/16. And these are all the possible combinations of internal networks. That's an industry standard. Click on add. And now I can go back to security, to firewall rules, and change it to advanced. By the way, I have created a video dedicated on firewall rules in UniFi. I really recommend that you watch this video. It will really help you understand the whole concept of firewall rules in UniFi. I'm going to go into LAN, and the first thing I want to do is to create a sort of a baseline where any network cannot communicate with any other network. And then, if I want to allow certain networks to communicate with each other, I will need to create firewall rules that allow this traffic. By the way, this is the standard on almost every other firewall vendor. I don't know why UniFi does it differently. So let's create an entry in LAN in, and let's name it block inter VLAN traffic. I'm going to drop protocol all, select in the source the group that we have created, and also in the destination, and add rule. Right, and now let's, for demonstration purposes, let's say that I want to allow the internal network to communicate with the IoT network. So I'll go back to the firewall rules and create an entry. and let's call it allow internal to IoT. Action will be accept. Source will be network. Default is my internal. Destination network IoT. Click on add rule, and I will create the exact same rule but the other way around. Let's create an entry and let's call it allow IoT to internal. Action accept. Source network IoT. Destination network default. Let's click on add rule, and because firewall rules are processed top to bottom, let's make sure that our blocking rule is in the bottommost spot. And now all the allow rules will be processed, and then when nothing is matching a firewall rule, it will come here and be blocked. Of course, we'll test that just in a little while. In the meantime, let's try to test out our blocking social network rule. So let me open up a new tab, a new browser window, sorry. And let's go to facebook.com. It's not loading. And if I'll go and cancel the block social rule, if I'll click on manage and pause, I'll give it a minute or two to take effect. I'm pretty sure that Facebook will now load. Let's try that again. And now Facebook loads. That's great. That means that our social blocking rule actually works. But let me try to resume it again. And done. Alright, so one more thing that I want to test out. I want to add a switch to my deployment. So I'm going to go into the devices tab right here. And now I'm going to plug my switch to my UniFi Express and my computer to the switch. And then I'm going to connect another wired client, and I want to test out my firewall rules. Alright, so my Flex Mini switch is ready to be adopted, so I'm going to click to adopt it. And this will take about a minute or two. Alright, so my Flex Mini switch has finished adopting. And if I look into it, I can see that this port right here is my uplink to my UniFi Express. And this port is where my computer is connected to. And I do want to connect another wired client, so I'll select this port, or let's first go to port manager. I'll select this port, and I'll select a native VLAN for it, not in the default network, but in the IoT network. Let's click on save. And now I'm going to connect my second wired client. Alright, so it took about 2 minutes for me, but now I can see that the port is lit, and I can see that my other client is connected. If I go to the clients tab, I can see that the IP address of the other client. And if I pull up a command prompt, and I'll try to ping the IP address of that second client, since I have firewall rules that allow communication between these VLANs, I should be able to ping and get a reply. Let's see. Sorry, I forgot a space there. And indeed, I can ping and get a reply. So just to make sure that indeed our firewall rules are the ones that are allowing it, let's go back to settings, security, firewall rules, click on advanced. Let's click on manage, select our two allow rules and pause them. Click on done. And now we're only left with the block inter-VLAN traffic. So that should be a sort of a catch-all. And now if I'll do the same ping to the same client in the same IP address, now I should not get a reply from my ping command. Let's try it out. And indeed, we now do not get a ping reply, meaning that our firewall rules are doing what they're supposed to do. That's great. For now, I'll re-enable them. and click on done. And so if I'll head over to the networks button right here, just to get a complete overview of my network, I can see that my Take Me Out coffee actually contains 3 networks with a private pre-shared key. I have 3 VLANs, and these are the subnets. That's great. So now the last thing that I want to test out is with a mobile device. I want to connect to my Wi-Fi network each time with a different password, and I want to see that I get a different IP address within a different subnet. So I'm going to switch over to my mobile phone. Alright, so I'll go to my Wi-Fi settings and I'll search for my newly created SSID. Here it is. And I'll select the first password that I created. And that should let me into one of my networks. It should be to the internal network. Let's see what IP address I got. And indeed, I got an IP address from my internal network. Okay, let's click on forget. And let's connect to the same Wi-Fi network again, but this time with a password from the guest network. And let's see if I get a different IP address. Let's check it out. And indeed, I got an IP address from my guest network with the same Wi-Fi SSID, different password. I get a different VLAN. That's great. Alright guys, so actually that was my deployment with the UniFi Express for a small business. I hope you guys liked it, and I would like to see you all in my next video. In the meantime, if you like this video, please give it a like. It will help me a lot. Bye everyone.